It is the 10th anniversary of Batman Arkham Knight, making it much farther than most marriages in the United States seem to, and also, of course, as well, putting it only 8 years away from being too old for a lot of Minecraft and Smash Bros. YouTubers. If you get it, you get it. Now, here's the thing. This game, I think, is very special. It is the end of an era with Rocksteady. It was the end at the time of the Batman Arkham series. It was the end of what they wanted to do with Batman. Of course, we do know that Suicide Squad came along, and while many may discount it as non-canon, Rocksteady and WB don't. But at the same time, this is a game that has a lot of sentimental value for me personally. It is a game that is partially responsible for my marriage. I've talked about that before, because my wife Jill actually found me by looking up this game. At the time on YouTube, I was a little bit of an authority on the game, just with analysis, top fives, things like that. Since then, obviously, I do more variety, but I still love and care about and make content on these games because they are special to me. So the fact that I met someone very special in my life through this game, the fact that this game was the end of an era for Rocksteady, all of these things kind of come together into what I wanted to do with a brief retrospective on the game. Just kind of spitballing my thoughts on what I liked, what I didn't, what did and did not connect with the overall general community and fandom, and where it stands now. If you enjoyed this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate that very, very much. You want to support this channel, I've actually played through Arkham games over on my other channel, Degenerate Plays. Right now we're playing through a lot of games. If you like superhero games on this channel, Degenerate J, we just did a mega 3-hour live stream playing a bunch of old superhero games together, hanging out, having fun. That's on the live stream tab. But I do have a question of the day for you today, which is, in general, what is your favorite Arkham game and why? Or, genuinely, if you have a hot take, what would be your Batman Arkham hot take? That's another question. And why? Like, why do you feel that way? I'm always interested to hear those things. Now, here's the thing. I think when we open up this game, right away, you can see some things that were off-putting to people immediately with this game. I think the first one is the fact that even this, I believe it's called like a wheel well, or no, wheel well is what it goes into. It's basically the Batmobile's wheel, right? I mean, like, from the beginning, they were marketing the Batmobile on this to the point where I would say they even had something that nowadays would have been a much bigger controversy but wasn't, which was the fact that there was a whole collector's edition of this game canceled. I believe there's only been a couple prototypes ever obtained by people. I'd love to have one, but I've never been able to get my hands on one. But it had a replica of this Batmobile. You know, the Batmobile that Batman uses in the game. It was going to have a small replica statue of that, and that didn't even come to fruition. So from the get-go, I think that it's fair to say that there were some issues around this game that previous Rocksteady Arkham games had not experienced. One of them being that immediately there was, DLC, like right away, that I think people were becoming more and more aware of. Arkham City had the same thing, but I think people really focused on it with this game. But in general, if we look at the positives, we moved past a couple of things that right away were off-putting to people. I think in general, this game has a very, very special, unique, and vibrant world. And to this day, I still actually encounter some Easter eggs and things that I don't know about or didn't remember. Every time I replay this game, I will come across something in the world that's a reference to a wider DC universe that surprises me, or that I didn't remember experiencing when I was younger. The one that comes to mind all the time for me is Constantine, where he basically had a little small business, an agency, right here in Gotham City. And there are a lot of references like that. Like, this is very clearly a game where Rocksteady cared about the overall wider DC universe and really wanted to embrace it in their final outing as Batman. And while there was a lot of disappointment at the time, thinking, okay, well, I wish we got a Justice League game, or I wish, we got a Flash game or things like that, the fact that they actually established that these characters did exist in this wider universe and went further in on those connections they had made in City and then WB Games Montreal made in Origins, I think was truly special. This game was also very, very respectful of prior work that had come in the franchise. I think the fact that at the time there was a whole controversy on whether or not Arkham Origins was canon or not, the fact that Rocksteady didn't even go down that road, they just immediately tied this game into their overall anthology, or their overall series, I should say, I think was very impressive and respectful, and something that unfortunately a lot of creators wouldn't take the time to do. Even putting in special Easter eggs like references to Copperhead's poison, or having Firefly reference the events of Arkham Origins on the bridge 10 years prior. They knew what they were doing with this game when it came to a world. They expanded Gotham City even further, now with you being able to go onto 3 separate islands, each that had some of their own characteristics, and I would argue that this game as well enhanced and improved the flow of combat and Predator modes, or Predator gameplay I should say, stealth gameplay, into a realm that I think a lot of people see as pure perfection, or almost the peak of what Arkham could be. Now here's the thing, when it comes down to it, are there complaints with those gameplay changes? Absolutely. The world was expanded, but it was expanded in a way to incorporate that controversy a little bit, that I should say, from earlier, which was the Batmobile. Now looking back at it, I personally stand on the ground, 10 toes down, planted firm, that there was a little too much Batmobile. I think there were times where the story required use of the Batmobile that it didn't need to. But overall, I think it's very impressive to look back at this game and see that Rocksteady hadn't done something like this before in the Arkham series. They hadn't gone in and made a playable car, the Batmobile, and made it something that tied into the overall world design. They hadn't done that. So the fact that they were able to do that, the car handles well, it's fun to drive, it actually is incorporated into world-based puzzles, I think those are impressive things. I just think things like, first off, the collector's edition obviously was right off the bat not a good impression, that version going away. But secondly, I think the fact that the people who were just playing the base game, as they played it, having Riddler so frequently tied into the Batmobile, instead of going the almost jigsaw-like puzzles from the previous game, having those be race-based, I think having the Batmobile be so tied into certain Riddler trophies, I think having it be so tied into tank fights, which there were a lot of in this game, and then later on, as DLC dropped, having a lot of that be focused on racetracks. While I understand that Rocksteady wanted to make the most out of this mechanic that they made, I do think that was very off-putting to a lot of people. I maybe was a little harsher on it at first than I am now. It's been 10 years. As you get older, you think different things. But I kind of stand by, there's a bit too much, but it's still a fun incorporation for the most part. Now that said, when it came to Predator and the combat itself, I thought that these two were very well refined. No longer are you really dropping very many combos because of anything outside of your control. While there was an expansion to more gimmicky villains in terms of thugs and things like that might have a particular way to take them down, it did add to the strategy of being Batman. The one criticism I see of this game is with the Predator, the fact that instant takedowns were so easy to get. That was something that I did see, like a very big frustration on from people who believed that it impacted the skill of the Predator sections. But overall, I enjoyed it. I thought that they expanded Batman's arsenal, adding in things like the voice, I'm blanking on it right now, but the voice gadget, the voice synthesizer, where you're able to use it to redirect somebody, do things like that. They tied in a little bit of the detective work from Origins, although I believe Origins did it better in that case. And they had this very sprawling and interesting, lively world. Now, when it comes to the story, there is a lot to talk about that could honestly be like a 30-minute video on its own, which is why I look over at myself in the recorder because I don't want to go on too far. But I will say this. The story can be summed up or, kind of boiled down to basics that make it sound worse than it is. Do I think this is the best story in the Arkham games? Not really, no. I actually think games like Arkham Origins or even Arkham City probably had a more interesting story to me that felt more narratively satisfying, but it was also very interesting to take a look at Gotham as it was in kind of Batman's final years in this form in his war on crime. In some ways, it reminded me of something like Batman the Animated Series to Batman the New Adventures, where you can kind of see like this escalation of the criminal element. You can see things getting more and more out of control to the point where Batman needs to bring in a tank of a Batmobile in order to deal with the problem. You can also see villains that are more tactical and looking to really basically dismantle Batman and his operation a piece at a time in characters like the Arkham Knight. Now here's the thing, the Arkham Knight, that is a character that led to a lot of frustration in the community. And I still maintain that if Rocksteady had said nothing about the character, instead of very, very, very much doubling down or tripling down on the idea that it was a new, unique, original character, you wouldn't have as many criticisms of the story as you do now. Because, spoiler alert for the Arkham Knight, if you haven't played the game, this is Jason Todd. And so in many ways, this story can be boiled down to something like Under the Red Hood, featuring Joker hallucinations and the Scarecrow. But I also think that does a disservice to a lot of the elements of the game. This game did a very good job dealing with trauma, dealing with the idea of someone who's very broken, who is lashing out at the world around them because of what happened to them. And I really enjoyed that interpretation of Jason Todd. And in fact, what happened to him in this universe might be one of the worst things that's happened to him in any universe I can think of. Instead of just being killed, he was held and tortured psychologically and physically for many, many months, with Batman believing him to be dead and essentially giving up on finding him. It's an extremely dark storyline. It very much ties into the Joker getting a last laugh in a way over the Dark Knight, and it deals with that psychological trauma, I think, in a unique way, where you can hear the pain in Jason's voice. You can hear when he's frustrated or angry at Batman, how emotional he is. I heard people call him whiny or desperate. Of course he'll be whiny or desperate. He went through one of the most PTSD-inducing experiences that anybody could ever go through, basically being groomed psychologically and beaten physically into hating his prior best friend and father figure. It is a dark storyline that I think they handle well, that I think unfortunately was very much overshadowed by Rocksteady claiming that the Arkham Knight was an original character. Now yes, I understand. In terms of lawyer speak or very, very much on paper, like, particulars, it is an original character. They had not made an Arkham Knight before this, but it still was a previously existing character just using a different name. In a lot of ways, this was just Red Hood from the story Under the Red Hood, but he didn't start going by that name until later in this universe. And so you can kind of understand why a lot of people were frustrated with that, feeling almost a bait and switch, which they had felt previously in a game like Arkham Origins, which had very much maintained that there was no Joker, that he was not the main villain, and then it turned out Joker was the main villain. So I think coming after Arkham Origins and being another bait and switch, unfortunately along with the Batmobile segments, really soured a lot of people's opinions on this game, but the positives of it are undeniable. The fact that that story, I still think it was handled very well and written well. The fact that this game had a psychological element of the Joker to it that I would argue no previous game had, where Joker was in your ear. It was something you couldn't escape. You couldn't punch your way away from that villain. This was someone who was built in and baked into Batman's brain. In many ways, it was almost Fight Clubby or Mr. Robot-esque, where you have these hallucinations and an unreliable narrator at the helm, which even did manifest in some scenes, like the scene with Tim Drake at Panessa Studios. These did lead to some unpredictable and very fascinating story moments that I would love to see another superhero game deal with. I can't think of many that could deal with it. Maybe one like Moon Knight, where you do have Khonshu or someone like that actively, engaging with the character. But it was very unique at the time that you had these elements. Now that said, the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow, I think, is a great villain, and I think Jonathan Crane does, in some moments in this game, come across very foreboding and terrifying, and his redesign was fantastic. But the focus on Jason, the focus on Batman's Joker hallucinations, sometimes did divide the attention away from the Scarecrow. Unfortunately, this is a similar problem we see in superhero movies like Spider-Man 3 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where sometimes you try to bite off a little more than you can chew, and it leads to a lack of focus on certain characters where it feels like a missed opportunity. So obviously anyone could fence sit and say, oh, well, there's some good and there's some bad. I personally, though, think that overall this game has more good than bad by a lot. I do think that there are things that are worth criticizing, and I do think that there are things that are open to criticism, but overall this is a very special game to me. The fact that it's turned 10 and people are still looking back and talking about it, the fact that these Batman Arkham games are still considered pretty much the cream of the crop when it comes to superhero games, these are things that I think show you that these games do stand the test of time and do still matter to this day. They're extremely special to people, and there's a very big reason for that. So I'm interested to hear what you think in the comments down below. What are your overall thoughts on Batman Arkham Knight? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you somewhere in between? What are your hot takes on Arkham, and what's your favorite? Love to hear that in the comments down below. Also, as well, we do have a Fortnite code that goes to help support our channel, DJAY123. And finally, we have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop. Coasters, keychains, trays, and more made from recycled, repurposed paper. We transform this in a new medium into a new type of art because these are damaged books like manga, magazines, and more that we take, save some of that paper, recycle it, transform it into a new medium, and then recycle the rest and get rid of that and make sure that does not end up in a landfill and actually goes to the recycling plants. Also, as well, we do have handmade beaded and resin jewelry over there. Thank you all for your support over there. It means a lot to us and it helps out our channel because, you know, this is not a huge channel, so those things are very helpful to us. Discount code DJAY123 for 10% off your first purchase over there. And if you want to check out our other channels, those will all be in the description down below. I have an RPG focused channel, we have an anime focused channel, and we also have our Let's Play channel where we play through games podcast style, hanging out with you. Looking forward to bringing back more live streams, more content on this channel. I appreciate you and hope you have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.